Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 14th, 2024. Well, there's no exaggeration when we talk about the leading elements of the Western world as psychopaths. The fact that the transatlantic leadership has chosen war as a way of dealing with the emergence of a potential new paradigm is the reality that we're facing today. And there are aspects of this which are absolute, almost self-admissions that the people doing this are psychopathic. Let's take, for example, Senator Lindsey Graham, who spoke to NBC's Meet the Press on May 12th. And in discussing the US use of nuclear weapons on two Japanese cities in World War II, he said, quote, "That was the right decision. So Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state. Whatever you have to do," unquote. Essentially advocating the use of nuclear weapons by Israel, whether against the Palestinian population or against Iran, was unclear. But his message was clear. It's okay to do mass killing. Now, this was the same message he presented in hearings on May 8th before the US Senate. There he said, quote, "Give Israel what they need to fight the war they can't lose. This is Hiroshima and Nagasaki on steroids," unquote. There's no indication that anyone in the Senate challenged him on this or objected to his advocacy of use of nuclear weapons by Israel. Now, is it possible that Israel might do something like that? Well, listen to Netanyahu's admission that at least 16,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza. His defense is, well, in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, millions were killed and uprooted. Where were the protests, he asked. And then he says there were none. So then why protest now against Israel, he asks? They're directed at, quote, "who we are," unquote, a proof for him that there's an anti-Semitic explosion in the world targeting Israel, and that Israel is doing nothing that's unacceptable. Now, he is making a relevant point, but not the one he intends. There should have been accountability for the slaughter that was carried out by the US and NATO in countries such as Iraq and Libya, Afghanistan, and so on. But who did the killings there? It was done by NATO. It was done by the transatlantic forces, the military powers that are enforcing the neo-colonial unipolar order. And so the complacency of the population, and to be fair, there were demonstrations against the Iraq war in particular, but the effect was taken by the establishment that there's not enough anger that they can continue to go ahead and do what they wish to do. But complacency of the population doesn't make it justified. Now, Netanyahu concluded that he could order mass civilian killings because the US and NATO got away with it. And it's true, Bush, Cheney, Blair, Obama, no consequences for them, no accountability for them in the international courts or in the United Nations. So it's not surprising to hear Blinken with his moral ambiguity when he was questioned on Face the Nation on May 12th. He agreed that Netanyahu's estimates of 16,000 civilians killed may be accurate. And he said Israel has, quote, "not applied continuously and effectively processes and regulations to try to minimize civilian harm," unquote. And he admitted that the invasion underway in Rafah might be crossing a red line. But the US will continue to stand by Israel, will continue to provide weapons, money, and political support. Hypocrisy? Well, this is just typical of the policies of the existing transatlantic region, which is continuing to shovel arms and weapons into Ukraine, talking about boots on the ground in Ukraine, offering no serious condemnation or no effective counter to what Israel is doing in Gaza. Well, you want to see more hypocrisy? What about the continued denial of the presence of neo-Nazi elements in Ukraine's armed forces and intelligence community? Remember the case of Yaroslav Hunka, a Ukrainian who was honored in the Canadian Parliament in the presence of Prime Minister Trudeau and President Zelensky of Ukraine. He was honored as a fighter against the Soviet Union in World War II. Who was fighting against the Soviet Union in World War II? It was the Nazis. And it was later admitted that Hunka was a member of a Ukrainian SS division which killed Jews and others, which carried out pogroms on behalf of the Nazis. So instead of extraditing him to stand trial for war crimes, he was just awarded by a Ukrainian regional council the Stetsko Medal, a medal named after a leader of the Ukrainian Nazis who allied with the Nazi Waffen-SS in 1943. So we see open support for Nazis in Ukraine. We see a turning away from what the International Court of Justice has called plausible case of genocide in Gaza. And we see billions of dollars, hundreds of billions, to fund wars intended to weaken Russia and to counter the efforts of the Global South and other nations to establish a just and fair international economic system, financial system, that will allow for development and instead will allow the continued plundering of those forces by the unipolar order backed by NATO and Western military. So that's what we're mobilizing to defeat. That's what the LaRouche Organization, the Schiller Institute, the International Peace Coalition is mobilizing for. A new paradigm typified by Lyndon LaRouche's idea of an oasis plan to bring water, fresh water, to the region in Southwest Asia where right now the fighting is going on. Don't wait to see if more are going to die. Don't wait to see more excuses from Blinken and Netanyahu and more slander against those people who are fighting against them. Now is the time to join us. Take this message seriously, circulate it, and become part of our movement to create a new, just security and development architecture for the world. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow.